Hey everyone, Greg Chapman here. Just going to read the beginning of my Bram Stoker Award nominated story, The Book of Last Words, which is in my collection, This Sublime Darkness and Other Dark Stories. So here we go. They call convicts on death row the walking dead, wasted souls on the long ride to hell. But after all these years watching the worst of humanity check out on their backs with a needle in their arms, I can't help but envy them. I've walked the halls of death row for almost a year, escorting inmates to their final moments, and, to me, their deaths come way too easy. But how would I know what they deserve? What does anyone deserve when their time comes? I thought I knew. The first time I noticed the strange man with the book was at the execution of spree killer Adam John Cole. The man was in the small crowd of approved onlookers. Usually people who come to witness an inmate's execution are family members of the victims, or journalists who've been cleared by the governor's office. This guy was none of those. But once the curtain into the viewing room parted, there was no mistaking the demure figure in the darkest corner of the room. At first I felt an overwhelming desire to question the man's presence in the viewing room, but I'd always assumed the witnesses had the right to be there, or at least, the permission. Regardless of my misgivings, my suspicion, I had a job to do. I kept my mouth shut and set about helping my partner Danny shackle Cole to the gurney. Cole's cockiness, sharply honed after 10 years on death row, kept every one of us, prison guard, clergyman and warden, on task. Well, looky at all the people who came to see my farewell shindig, Cole said, like he was at a rodeo. Warden Reed stepped up to the centre stage and unnecessarily straightened his tie. Adam John Cole, you have been condemned by a jury of your peers to die by lethal injection, sentenced by a judge in good standing in this state. Do you have anything to say before this sentence is carried out? I glanced out into the crowd. Half a dozen faces of all creeds, colours and ages, united in sorrow, except the strange little man. Cole's voice pulled me back. I killed all those people because... Cole's unshaven throat bobbed as he swallowed. They all embraced their guilt in the end. I prayed he didn't piss or shit on the floor. He took a deep breath and continued. I just needed another fix, you know. It was the drugs. Cole turned to look at me, as if for vindication, and I turned my gaze back to the crowd. I preferred to look at people crying than a last-minute plea for mercy. I noticed a strange man writing very carefully in a large leather-bound book. I didn't hear the warden call my name. Officer Holder. I froze and looked at the warden, whose fuzzy eyebrows were knotted in consternation. Danny flashed me the same grizzled look. Back on track, I helped Danny turn the gurney around so the crowd could see Cole's profile. The injection team pounced like vultures and inserted the IVs in Cole's arm. Cole trembled, his brow slick with sweat. The Reverend stepped in and said his prayer, but I knew deep down he hoped the multiple murderer burned in hell. As the concoction ran up the IV tube to Cole's arm and invaded his blood, I remembered my friend Alex being blown to bits by a roadside bomb in Kandahar, and how I almost joined him. Once Cole had closed his eyes for the last time, I looked back to the crowd. The strange man was gone. So that's the opening to my story, The Book of Last Words. Thanks for letting me share it.
Hi, I'm Gwendolyn Kiste, and I'll be reading from my short story, The 8 People Who Murdered Me, excerpt from Lucy Westenra's diary. 1. You. The teeth in the neck gambit obviously starts all of this. Don't think I'll forget that. Don't expect for one moment you're going to get off too easily. You might not be the only one to blame, but you're still mostly to blame. For how you come to me when I'm by myself, a lonely girl in a goblin market where some treasures are best left undiscovered. Tonight my mother's hosting another soiree, all in my honor, a way to find me, the perfect husband. She doesn't care what I have to say about it. Nobody cares what I say. So without a word, I slip out the back door and take an evening stroll through the city, past the downtown train station with its melancholy whistles and along cobblestone streets with vendors that keep strange hours. What do you seek, pretty girl? They ask, their lips curled up in grotesque smiles, each of them proffering me trinkets meant to solve problems I don't have. My nervous hands clasped in front of me, I turn away, and that's when I see you. There at the corner, emerging beneath a gaslight, your voice a sweet melody that could Pied Piper all the children of London to their unmarked graves. Good evening, Miss Lucy, you whisper, and my skin hums in refrain. I never ask how you know me. It should be my first question, but you don't look like a question to me. You look like an answer. An escape from the everyday, the humdrum of parlors and suitors in a future where I'll surrender my name and freedom in exchange for a title. Mrs. Mother, nothing more. But you pretend to offer another way. In an instant, we're together, perched side by side on an iron park bench, and you share everything about yourself. Where you came from, how you traveled aboard a ship named after Persephone's mother, a woman who knew loss so intimately. Your gaze speaks to me of loss, too. It feels as though you already know me, that we've met like this 1,000 times before. So I lean in and whisper my secrets in your ear. How I'm desperate for something more, something you promised me without ever speaking a word. You might be a stranger, but it seems safer to share these things with you than with my own best friend. As the moon slips across the sky, you guide me to my feet and we sway together, dancing to music no one else can hear. Don't let me go, I say, and you smile, because you'll oblige, just not quite the way I expect. Your breath sweet as marzipan, you embrace me, one hand on my shoulder, the other on the small of my back. We're so close I can barely breathe. Then all at once, I can't breathe, or move, or even scream. When you finished with me, and I return home, my head heavy and vision blurred, the party is long over, and the house has gone quiet. In my own bedroom, nothing looks familiar. Not the faded floral wallpaper, or the vanity arrayed with candlesticks, or the canopy beds, one that's mine, and the other with Mina, curled up in the dark. Are you awake? I ask, my voice splitting in two, blood on my hands, blood that's all my own. But she's already fast asleep, and it isn't worth waking her now, even if I could form the words to tell her what you've done to me. 2. My mother. She could have warned me. She could have stitched crosses into all my corsets and brewed me vervain tea until my blood was brimming with it, and you wouldn't have wanted me. Better yet, she could have taken my hand, and I would have taken Mina's, and we could have run together, further than the edge of town, further than the Carpathian Mountains, to somewhere no man would be brave enough to follow. But that isn't what she did. It isn't what any of our mothers have done. This is the world they inherited, and it's the one we'll get to. Perhaps we shouldn't expect anything more. My father, with his bulging bank account and dirty fingernails, is below mention. Sometimes men are far crueler than monsters. 3. My best friend, Mina, sweet Mina, a light of all lights. Even if my mother wouldn't have come with us, we still could have fled this city of death. That was what we always wanted. Shall we run away together today? I'd ask, back when we were just girls who didn't know enough to know we should be afraid. Tomorrow, she would whisper, and we'd laugh and dance together in the garden maze, our fingers entwined, fresh blooms of wisteria woven through our hair. For years, I believed tomorrow would come. But today has come instead. The morning when Mina can see the gray glint in my eye. This unwitting change stirring within me, all thanks to what you've done. Now she only shakes her head. We're not children anymore, Lucy, she says. And I suppose this means we can no longer dream. Thank you.
Hello, friends. My name is John Kachuba, and it's a shame we can't all be together for StokerCon, but I do appreciate the opportunity to talk a few minutes about my book, Shapeshifters, A History, which has been nominated for the Bram Stoker Award in nonfiction. And this is the book. You can see the poster behind me. This is the real thing. Shapeshifters, as I said, is nonfiction. And what it does is it looks at the shapeshifter character in cultures all around the world, from ancient times, Neolithic times, up to the modern day. And it looks at shapeshifters in a variety or through a variety of lenses. For instance, it looks at it historically, theologically, mythologically, psychologically, and it even looks at the shapeshifter character in popular culture, such as films, books, computer games, that kinds of thing. It looks at cosplay. It looks at a lot of different areas that have to do with shapeshifting. So what I want to do is just read you two brief little passages from the book. When we think of shapeshifters, we think primarily of werewolves and vampires, right? Those are sort of the stereotypical shapeshifters. And so I'm going to read actually a little bit from the chapter on werewolves and the chapter on vampires, since they are the stereotypical types. But the book is much broader than that. And it covers literally hundreds of types of shapeshifters, as I mentioned, from cultures all around the world and from different times. So I think you'll find it very interesting. And again, I'd like to thank everybody for nominating it and making it a finalist in the Bram Stoker Award. So let's see. So the first thing I'm going to read is a passage. Well, actually, first thing I'm going to do is get my cheaters. Ah, there you are. Okay. So the first passage I'm going to read is the opening of the chapter on vampires. Somewhere in a bedchamber, drenched in moonlight, a beautiful young woman sleeps. But she sleeps fitfully, her slumber bedeviled by frightful dreams. Restlessly tossing and turning, a scratching sound at her casement window awakens her. She sits up in bed, terrified to see a huge bat with glowing red eyes hovering just outside the open window. Too terrified to scream, she can only sit helplessly and watch as the bat flies in through the window, circles over her bed, and then disappears. In its place stands a tall, gaunt figure, dressed in black. A man as pale as death, with hypnotic eyes that pierce her very soul. He draws closer, extending one hand to her, an invitation of sorts, the talon-like fingernails black and sharp as razors. Her eyes locked on his, she cannot move. She cannot even think of moving, even as he bends over her, bearing fangs like daggers gleaming in the moonlight. It must be a dream, a horrible nightmare, but no, the pain is too real, too intense, as he sinks his fangs into the warm flesh of her neck, greedily drinking of her life's blood. It is the first bite, but it won't be the last. And soon, she too will stalk the night as one of the bloodthirsty undead. That's a little dramatic, right, and sort of stereotypical. But anyway, that's the vampire book, the opening to the vampire. The second thing I want to read to you is the opening for werewolf, because I think this one more encompasses the whole idea of a shapeshifter, what it means to sort of be dual-natured. So this is the opening to the werewolf. An old Cherokee man was teaching his grandson about life. As the embers from the campfire floated up into the night, the old man said, "Grandson, there is a fight going on inside me. It is a terrible fight between two wolves. One wolf is evil, he is anger, envy, sorrow, resentment, and regret. He is greed, arrogance, self-pity, and ego. The other wolf is good. He is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, and kindness. He is empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith. This same fight is going on inside you, and in every other person, too." The grandson thought about it for a minute and then asked, "Which wolf will win?" The old man simply replied, "The one you feed." Again, that's the opening to werewolf. So anyway, I don't want to spend a lot of time here, but thanks very much again for nominating Shapeshifters. And I hope that it'll be only a short time before we can all get together in person to celebrate each other, celebrate life, celebrate horror. In the meantime, be safe.